Before I begin, welcome to this channel where I share long, first-person stories about family, betrayal, and the exact moment when someone decides they are done being the victim. If you like calm, detailed confessions that feel uncomfortably real, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because today I'm going to tell you how my own son tried to destroy my life to save himself, and how all the tricks I learned in 30 years as a police inspector ended up turning his perfect plan against him. Everything you're about to hear is fiction created only to entertain, and any similarity to real people or situations is pure coincidence. My name is Mateo Delgado. I'm 64 years old, and my son thought I wouldn't notice when he slipped something into my fishing tackle box and then walked away like nothing had happened. But after 3 decades working major cases with the national police in a big city called Villa Brava, I can smell deception from across a room. And when I finally opened that box later, what I found didn't just chill my blood because of what it was. It broke something inside me because it proved my own son was willing to sacrifice me. He had no idea how the story would end. This is how the love of a father turned into a fight for survival. It started on a cool morning in late October. Sunlight came through the dusty windows of my garage in our quiet suburb of Monte Robledo, just outside Villa Brava, while I checked my fishing license and sorted my gear for a Saturday escape to a reservoir I love, Lake San Bruno. At 64, those solo trips had become my refuge since I lost my wife Laura 4 years earlier. I was lining up my lures when my son Daniel appeared in the doorway. Something about the way he was standing hit me immediately. His shoulders were tight, his movements too careful, like someone trying very hard to look relaxed while holding back a wave of panic. "Morning, Dad," he said, his tone a little too cheerful. "Getting ready to go catch something?" I nodded without looking up, pretending to be absorbed in my hooks. "The lake should be perfect today," I muttered. Daniel stepped closer, and every instinct I'd screamed that something was wrong. His eyes kept flicking back to my tackle box, again and again. After 30 years reading body language from suspects and liars, I knew that look. "Mind if I take a look at your setup?" he asked as he moved toward the box before I could answer. I watched him carefully. His breathing was shallow, and there were small beads of sweat forming on his forehead, even though the garage was cool. When he thought I wasn't watching, his gaze went straight to the little compartment where I keep my spare hooks. That's when I saw it. Daniel's right hand moved toward the inside pocket of his jacket in a smooth, practiced motion and came back out with something small wrapped in black tissue paper. The move was quick and sneaky. If I hadn't been looking with trained eyes, I might have missed it. He lowered the object into the main compartment at the bottom of the box, burying it between my spoons and sinkers, then closed everything like no big deal. The whole sequence took maybe 10 seconds, but for me it was like watching a crime unfold in slow motion in my own garage. My heart was hammering, but I forced myself to stay calm, tying a leader as if nothing had happened. Daniel stepped back and wiped his hands on his jeans in a gesture that looked more like someone trying to get rid of evidence than cleaning dust. "All right, I'll leave you to it," he said, already turning toward the door. "Have fun, Dad. Maybe you'll catch a monster today." I watched him disappear into the house, his footsteps fading up the stairs. The garage went quiet except for the distant hum of traffic on the ring road and my own heavy breathing. I stared at the tackle box, as if it had suddenly become dangerous. Whatever Daniel had hidden there, he clearly didn't want to find it right away, but he also seemed strangely confident that I would discover it eventually. That contradiction only made sense if he wanted me to find it when it was already too late to react. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own son had just planted something among my belongings, expecting it to cause serious trouble for me. I thought about the past few months, about his growing desperation for money, his mood swings, the way he avoided eye contact. I had told myself it was the stress of being unemployed and the grief of losing his mother. I ignored the signs because I loved him. But 30 years on the force taught me that love can blind you to the truth. And the truth was sitting inside that tackle box, wrapped in black paper like a present I had never asked for. I stayed there in the middle of the garage, staring at my box, as if it were a ticking bomb, and my mind drifted back to the night before, when maybe I should have seen this coming. The warning signs were written on Daniel's face during dinner in letters I chose not to read. Friday night had started normal enough. I was grilling a couple of steaks while Daniel set the table. The late October air carried that familiar smell of roasted chestnuts from street vendors downtown. And for a moment, it almost felt like the old days, when Laura would step out of the kitchen complaining that I was taking too long with the meat. But Laura wasn't there anymore. The empty chair at our dining table in Monte Robledo was a constant reminder of everything we'd lost 4 years earlier. Daniel had been unusually quiet, pushing food around his plate more than actually eating. His hand shook when he reached for his glass of water, but I told myself it was just nerves from job hunting. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," he finally said, barely above a whisper. I recognized that tone immediately. It was the same voice he used as a teenager when he wanted money for some school trip. But Daniel was 29 now, and conversations like that had become far too common. "What's going on, son?" I asked. He took a deep breath, his fingers tapping nervously on the wooden table. "I'm in trouble. Money trouble. I need 48,000 euros. The number hit me like a slap. I put my fork down and studied his face under the warm light of the lamp. His eyes were bloodshot, with dark circles underneath that made him look much older, and he'd lost so much weight, I wondered when he had last eaten properly. 48,000, I repeated slowly, trying to keep my voice even. "Daniel, that's more than I have in my savings. What kind of mess are you in?" His jaw clenched. Something flashed across his features. Anger, or maybe a desperation, so deep it had turned into something darker. "Does it really matter?" he snapped. "I'm your son. I need help." "Of course it matters," I answered. "I've been helping you for months. The rent, the car payment, groceries. Where's all that money going?" Daniel stood up, so fast the chair scraped loudly across the parquet floor. "You don't understand the people I'm dealing with," he said, his voice rising. "They don't have patience. They won't wait for me to sort things out." "What people, Daniel?" I asked, but he was already moving toward the stairs. "Forget it. I'll find another way," he muttered, and then the only answer I got was the slam of his bedroom door. I stayed alone at the table, surrounded by half-eaten food and a growing certainty that my son was involved in something much worse than simple unemployment. The rest of the night passed in heavy silence. I cleaned the kitchen, watched the news, and went through my usual routine while Daniel stayed locked in his room. I could hear him pacing above my head, sometimes talking on the phone in a low, urgent tone. Now, standing in my garage 12 hours later, those secretive calls took on a new, sinister meaning. Daniel had not been looking for legitimate help. Last night, he had been testing me, checking if I would give him the money willingly. When I said no, he moved to plan B. Whatever was wrapped in that black tissue paper was his insurance policy, his way of getting what he wanted without caring about the price I would have to pay. I thought about Laura, about her voice on that hospital bed when she asked me to look after her son. "He's lost without you, Matteo," she had whispered. "Promise me you'll be patient with him." I had been patient for 4 long years while Daniel slid into addiction right in front of me. Patient while my savings disappeared in the name of emergencies. Patient while the sweet boy Laura had raised turned into someone I hardly recognized. Tears I hadn't shed since her funeral burned my eyes as I imagined that cursed package in my hand. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, mine. If Daniel's plan worked, I'd be arrested for drug trafficking. At my age, a conviction like that would mean spending my final years in a special wing for ex-officers at a prison on the outskirts of the city, while Daniel inherited everything Laura and I had built. The kid I taught to fish in this very garage was ready to destroy me, to save himself. I wrapped my fingers more tightly around the idea of that package in my mind. My hands were still shaking, but now it was from a cold determination. Daniel thought he was playing chess against someone who didn't know the rules, but he had forgotten his father spent 30 years staying one step ahead of criminals. If my own son wanted to play this game, he was about to discover I still had a few moves he wasn't expecting. Emotions were a luxury I could no longer afford. I had to know exactly what I was dealing with. Finally, I walked over to the tackle box. 30 years of training fought against a father's denial. The metal latches opened with the familiar clicks that used to bring me peace when fishing was my escape from everything I saw on the job. Now those sounds felt contaminated. I lifted the top tray. There, between my favorite silver spoon and a handful of sinkers, was the black wrapping. I picked it up with trembling fingers and peeled the tissue away. The paper fell open, revealing a clear plastic bag filled with fine white powder. Even without a lab, I knew exactly what I was looking at. I had seen enough confiscated narcotics in evidence rooms over the years to recognize it instantly. The bag weighed maybe 55 grams. Street value, somewhere between 14 and 18,000 euros, easily enough to qualify as possession with intent to distribute under the penal code. More than enough to destroy what was left of my life. I sank down onto the workbench. The bag felt like molten lead in my palm. The garage seemed to spin as the full weight of Daniel's betrayal came crashing down on me. My son wasn't just in trouble. He was an addict. All the signs I had brushed aside lit up in my memory like neon. The weight loss, the red eyes, the mood swings I blamed on grief. How had I, a man who had spent 3 decades catching criminals, failed to see that my own son had become one? But worse than the addiction was the betrayal. Daniel hadn't put that bag there by accident. It was deliberate, calculated. He wanted those drugs found, just not by me, not at first. He wanted someone else to discover them, someone with a badge and a warrant. The realization hit me again, even harder. Daniel was setting me up. I thought of Laura and of the promise I had made to her to take care of our son. I had done that. I had given him chances again and again, looked the other way more than I should have, pretended not to see what was happening. But this had gone beyond helping a son with problems. This had become survival. I rewrapped the bag in the black tissue with much steadier hands than before. My grief hardened into something cold and focused. I put the package back into the box for the moment, closed it, and walked into the house with a plan forming in my mind. I climbed the stairs and stopped outside Daniel's bedroom. His door was closed, but his voice came through, urgent and pleading. "I told you, Nico. I just need one more week," he said. "My dad's being difficult with the money, but I'm working on it." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, every police instinct in me sharpening. No, please, don't do that," he continued. "I have a plan. By tomorrow night, you'll have everything you're asking for. 48,000, I swear." My blood ran cold. Then I heard him place another call. "Paula, it's Daniel," he said after a pause. "Yes, I know the mortgage payment is late, but I'll have the money tomorrow. You won't have to start foreclosure." My knees almost buckled. Foreclosure. Daniel had put my house up as collateral for something, and I had no idea. About 20 minutes later, he came out of his room dressed in a clean shirt and slacks, the outfit he used for job interviews. He looked surprisingly composed for someone I had just heard begging for more time. "I'm heading to that interview, Dad," he shouted down the stairs. "Wish me luck." I waited until I heard the front door close and his car backing out of the driveway before I moved. Then I went straight into his room. If Daniel was planning to throw me to the wolves, I needed to know exactly which wolves we were dealing with. His bedroom told the story through the documents he had tried to hide. Bank statements showed large cash withdrawals over the last 6 months. Credit card bills revealed cash advances totaling close to 28,000 euros, most of them taken at a big casino outside the city. But it was the private loan contract that made my hands shake the most. A lender named Paula Revert had given Daniel 75,000 euros using my house as collateral. My signature was on the documents, or rather, a decent copy of my signature. He had forged my name on paperwork that put every cent I owned at risk. The picture became crystal clear. Daniel had burned through money he never had at the gambling tables. When those debts piled up, he went to Paula, using my home as security. When that money ran out, he turned to Nico for drugs, probably planning to sell them to pay off the other debts. Now both creditors were breathing down his neck. Nico wanted his 48,000 by Sunday, or Daniel would face consequences far worse than bankruptcy, and Paula was ready to start the process to take my house. Cornered by 2 dangerous people, Daniel had decided that sacrificing his father was his best way out. The trap wasn't just about money. It was about eliminating the only person who could stop him from destroying everything Laura and I had built. Sitting on his bed, surrounded by proof of his betrayal. I felt the last fragile threads of fatherly affection snap. This wasn't about helping a struggling son anymore. This was about staying alive and out of prison. I took photos of every document with my phone, making sure I captured signatures, dates, amounts, names. If this ever reached a courtroom, I would need proof that Daniel had stolen my identity. But first I had to neutralize the immediate threat. That bag in my tackle box was a loaded gun aimed at my future. I wasn't going to let Daniel be the one who pulled the trigger. I went back down to the garage with a new kind of determination. 30 years in the force had taught me that sometimes the best defense is a well-planned counterattack. Daniel thought he was dealing with a tired old man. He had forgotten who taught him to read people, who had come home for decades smelling of gun oil and coffee after nights in the homicide unit. The package was still exactly where I'd left it, wrapped in black tissue paper. I picked it up and felt its weight in my hand. 55 grams of white powder that could either destroy my life or protect it, depending on where they ended up. Through the small window in the garage, I could see Daniel's old hatchback parked at the front of the house. It was a 10-year-old car I'd helped him buy when he finished his degree, back when I still believed he would turn into the kind of man his mother hoped for. A little later, I heard the front door open and Daniel's voice calling out, "Dad, the car's making that weird noise again. I'm going to order a rideshare to go to the interview. I don't want to risk getting stuck." Perfect. Another lie for his collection, but this one worked in my favor. "Good idea, son," I called back. "Better safe than sorry." I waited until I heard the rumble of the car from the rideshare pulling away and his footsteps fading down the path. Then I took Daniel's car keys from the hook by the back door. He always left them there. The trunk opened with a soft click. Inside were a set of jumper cables, a spare tire, and an old sports bag he hadn't used in months. I moved the bag aside and slid the wrapped package down by the wheel well, in a spot that would be easy for a proper search to find, but not visible at first glance. As I closed the trunk, I thought of Laura again and what she would say if she could see me now. She believed in second chances and in the power of love to redeem the worst mistakes. But Laura never had to stand in front of a son who was ready to destroy his own father to save his skin. I hung the keys back on their hook and returned to the garage. My tackle box sat open on the bench, suddenly innocent again without its deadly cargo. I took my time cleaning every surface Daniel might have touched, wiping down handles, trays, and tools, making sure no trace of him remained on anything connected to that box. For years, I had tried to save a son who was already falling off a cliff. Now I was trying to save myself from the same person I couldn't rescue. My phone vibrated with a text from Daniel. "Interview went great," he wrote. "They'll tell me something on Monday. Thanks for believing in me, Dad." That casual lie would have cut deep yesterday. Today it only confirmed what I already knew. Daniel had crossed a line he could not come back from. I remembered the calls I had heard earlier, the desperation in his voice as he begged Nico and Paula for more time. He had promised the money by tomorrow night, money he planned to get by destroying me. But plans tend to fall apart when you underestimate your opponent. I finished reorganizing my lures and sinkers until everything looked perfect. An old retired cop getting his tackle ready for a peaceful day of fishing, nothing more. Daniel would come home expecting to find his trap set. Instead, he would walk into a trap that no longer belonged to him. He was no longer the hunter. Late that afternoon, a little after 6, Daniel came home looking more confident than I'd seen him in months. He walked in with a light step, as if his problems had magically disappeared. "How did the interview go?" I asked from my armchair, keeping my tone casual. "Honestly, Dad, pretty good," he said, hanging his jacket on a chair in the kitchen with relaxed movements. "I think this could be the break I've been waiting for." I watched him closely, noticing how his eyes never once drifted toward the garage. He was acting, and he was doing it well. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed him. "That's great, son. When will they let you know?" "Monday," he replied, starting toward the stairs, then pausing. "I'm pretty tired. I'll take a nap before dinner." I nodded and turned my attention back to the television, but I was listening for every creak of the floorboards above, every muffled voice behind his door. It didn't take long. About 20 minutes later, I heard Daniel's voice, tense and excited. "Yes, I want to report a drug trafficking case, he said. My name is Daniel Delgado, and I have proof my father is dealing with illegal substances. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay still. This was the moment everything had been building toward. His name is Mateo Delgado, he continued smoothly. He's 64. He's been hiding product in his fishing tackle box. I saw him with a large quantity this morning. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, the relief of someone convinced their problems are about to disappear. He gave the dispatcher our address in Monte Robledo, described exactly where the box was, and even invented details about my supposed partners in crime. Yes, I'll wait here, he said. Please hurry. I'm afraid he might try to move the drugs. The irony would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so tragic. Daniel was right to worry that the drugs would be moved. He just didn't know it had already happened. I listened as he ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Nico, it's Daniel, he said. Yeah, it's done. The cops are on their way to arrest my father. You'll get your money tomorrow. Then a third call. Paula, everything is going according to plan. Once they arrest him, I'll have access to everything. Your loan will be paid in full. I sat in my living room, listening to my son calmly orchestrate my destruction with the efficiency of a career criminal. A small part of me was almost impressed by how thorough he had been. The rest of me felt sick. About 15 minutes later, I saw the first National Police car pull into our driveway, followed by two more and an unmarked sedan. Through the window, I recognized the woman stepping out of the lead vehicle. Inspector Julia Navarro, an old colleague from my days at headquarters. Daniel came downstairs with his face arranged into a mask of worried innocence. Dad, there are police cars outside, he said, pretending confusion. What's going on? His performance was flawless. If I hadn't heard his phone calls, I might have believed his concern was real. The doorbell rang, sharp and authoritative. Time. Daniel moved toward the door, but I stood up first. I'll get it, son, I said. As I walked down the hallway, I caught his reflection in the mirror. For a heartbeat, when he thought I wasn't looking, his mask slipped. Underneath was a cold, calculating expression, completely empty of remorse. The officers had no idea that when they stepped through my door, the script would not be the one Daniel had written for them. I opened the door and found Inspector Navarro standing there, flanked by two officers from the narcotics unit in tactical vests. Behind them, other officers were already checking the perimeter. Hello, Mateo, she said, her voice professional but tinged with regret. We need to talk. Of course, Julia. Come in, I replied. Daniel stepped forward, his face the picture of confusion. Inspector Navarro, what is this about? Is my father in trouble? Julia looked from him to me, reading the scene with the sharp eye of a woman who had spent 2 decades in the force. We received a report about drug trafficking at this address, she said. We have a warrant to search the premises. Drug trafficking? Daniel repeated, his voice cracking with fake shock. That's impossible. My father would never. It's all right, son, I interrupted calmly. Let them do their job. The officer in charge stepped up. Mr. Delgado, we have information that you've been keeping illegal substances in your fishing tackle box, he said. Daniel's eyes lit up with eager cooperation. Oh, that's in the garage, he said quickly. I can show you exactly where it is. I followed the group down the hallway, watching Daniel's confident stride. He was so sure he had already won. There it is, he said, pointing at my tackle box. He was working with it this morning. He seemed very nervous. The officer opened the latches carefully. He lifted the top tray, revealing my neatly arranged lures and sinkers, and checked every compartment, slow and methodical. Nothing. He looked up puzzled. There are no controlled substances here, he reported. Daniel's face went pale. That's not possible, he stammered. I saw him put something there this morning. There was a package wrapped in black tissue paper. I'm sure of it. Take a good look, son, I said softly. What exactly do you think you saw? The calm mask on Daniel's face started to crack. I'm telling you, there was something there, he insisted. Julia Navarro studied him with a new kind of attention. You seem very certain about what was in your father's box, she said slowly. Why is that? I was just trying to help, Daniel babbled. I thought I saw something suspicious. We're going to search your vehicle, Julia said, her tone losing all warmth. My car. Daniel's voice jumped an octave. Why? I'm the one who called you. But the officers were already heading toward his hatchback. The trunk opened with a soft click. One of them moved the old sports bag aside and froze. His hand came back up holding the clear plastic bag full of white powder, still wrapped in that familiar black tissue. Daniel Delgado, Julia said, her voice like steel. You are under arrest for possession of narcotics with intent to distribute and for filing a false report. Daniel's face cycled through disbelief and pure panic. This is a setup, he shouted. He did this. He moved it. Oh, really? Julia asked. Then why did you call us and tell us to search your father's tackle box instead of your own car? As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Daniel looked at me with naked hatred. You did this, he spat. You moved it. I held his gaze, steady and calm. Son, I have no idea what you're talking about, I said. His expression told me everything. He had never truly believed his father could outplay him. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom and watched my son face the consequences of his choices. Daniel looked small in his prison uniform, none of his old confidence left. The prosecutor laid out the case. About 55 grams of illegal substance, intent to distribute, falsifying a report, attempting to frame a family member. Recordings of his calls to Nico and Paula sealed his fate. There was no way to explain those away. Daniel tried to apologize, his voice barely audible, but the words sounded empty, like he was reading lines for the judge instead of speaking from his heart. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. My lawyer managed to prove that the signatures on the loan documents were forged, so legally my house was safe. Faced with possible charges, Paula disappeared, and Nico was arrested short time later in a separate operation. About 8 months after the trial, I sold a house in Monte Robledo. It was time to start over. Now I live in a small apartment up in the hills with a view of the mountains. I have no debts, no obligations, and no family members close enough to cut my throat if things get difficult. I kept only what really matters. The photos of Laura, my fishing gear, and the hard lesson that love without limits turns into enabling, and enabling eventually destroys both people. Daniel has written to me twice from prison. Both letters sit unopened on my table. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting that the person who shares your blood can also be your enemy. I chose to survive. If you listened all the way to the end, thank you for staying with me. If this story resonated with you, tap the like button, tell me in the comments what part hit you the hardest and from which country you're watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel because there are many more stories like this one coming soon.